Senator Cory Booker raises urgent questions about whether the Department of Justice is protecting the American people or redirecting its focus away from the crimes that matter most. In this exchange, he challenges the shifting of federal law enforcement resources and warns that public safety, accountability, and trust in justice are being put at risk.
I'm really concerned about the application of Justice Department resources towards the challenges we have. You and I both know that about 11,000 Americans have been killed by a firearm just this year. The Department of Justice, according to the White House's own documents, as well as that of the conservative think tank Cato, have shown that there has been a significant movement of law enforcement resources away from many other issues and into immigration enforcement. And we are seeing that in that immigration report, a lot of the people are not the violent criminals that we are really needing to rid our streets of. In total, according to the Cato Institute, you've reassigned 7,460 law enforcement away from their primary duties, investigating drug traffickers, prosecuting child pornography, targeting high-value white-collar criminals, and again, forcing them, this is according to the Cato Institute, into low-level immigration enforcement. This includes, in terms of gun violence, 1,778 agents from the ATF to this kind of immigration enforcement. The White House itself has said that they diverted 45% of all of agents in 25 FBI field offices to work on immigration full-time. As a person who worked very closely in my time as mayor with the New Jersey field office, that's really concerning given the other threats. But it doesn't end there. The DOJ has eliminated the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, the independent component of the DOJ, whose job it was to combat transnational organized crime, dissolve the Community Relations Service, which in New Jersey has been invaluable over 60 years, responding to communities experiencing conflict or violence, and something that people on both sides of the aisle of this committee have really invested in. You all have rescinded VOCA and VAWA grants to support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. There seems to be a disconnect here between the application of the resources of the Justice Department on the things that are most concerning when it comes to crime and where they're being directed instead.
Senator Booker, first to OCDETF. The most important point is that the work of OCDETF is continuing. The executive office is being dissolved. We have said that, but the work of OCDETF is continuing. The resources that were previously provided to law enforcement organizations through OCDETF are now going directly to those organizations. I will assure you, no work will be sacrificed as a result of getting rid of the executive office of OCDETF. The agents and the attorneys are working with Homeland Security. They're all working together as a unit.
Okay, Attorney General Bondi, I'm running out of time, and I'm going to put some questions in QFRs, because again, this is conservative think tanks and others are pointing about the literally over 1,000 people being taken off of things that I think would concern the public. I'd like to get that, but I also just want to quickly mention that for the record, I want to ask about the public corruption unit as well. We now have gone from a public corrupt integrity section that went from 36 full-time prosecutors to now only 2. And yet we know, Democrats and Republicans, there is a real problem with public corruption in our country. And we know that the DOJ has stopped enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force, dismissed the indictment against Trump donor Andrew Weidenhorn, cut back on white-collar investigations. My list goes on. I'm running out of time. But I will ask for the record against not only reassigning officers and prosecutorial resources from the other things I mentioned, but public corruption is really important. I want to talk about an area of bipartisanship on this committee, which is antitrust. This is a very bipartisan area. In June, the Antitrust Division finalized a proposed consent decree with Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Networks, settling the DOJ's challenge to the company's $14 billion merger. Reportedly, your Chief of Staff, Chad Mizell, and Acting Deputy Attorney General Woodard overruled career antitrust staff and approved the merger. This is a massive area of concern for Americans writ large. This is an area where corporate power is growing, corporate concentration in our country is happening at great degree. I'm grateful that the ranking member with Mike Lee on a committee that is really trying to get into this disturbing trend and the issues right now in the Justice Department, the resources being put on it, and the appearance of improprieties that we're seeing are troubling. All I want to ask as my final question is, would you commit just to talk about antitrust to coming before the antitrust subcommittee led by Senator Lee to discuss antitrust enforcement in our country?
What Senator Booker is articulating in this exchange is not a narrow dispute over budgets or bureaucratic reshuffling, but a deep structural concern about how the Department of Justice is defining its mission at a moment of overlapping national crises. His argument is built around a simple but powerful premise: resources reflect priorities. When thousands of federal law enforcement personnel are reassigned away from gun violence, drug trafficking, child exploitation, white-collar crime, and public corruption, and redirected toward broad immigration enforcement, that choice inevitably reshapes public safety outcomes. Booker is not questioning whether immigration enforcement has a role. He is questioning whether it should come at the expense of the very crimes that most directly threaten American lives and democratic integrity. By citing firearm deaths, DOJ documents, and even conservative institutions like the Cato Institute, Booker deliberately grounds his critique in bipartisan and non-ideological sources. This is a strategic move. It signals that the concern is not partisan spin, but an evidence-based assessment that DOJ enforcement capacity is being hollowed out in critical areas. The reassignment of nearly 1,800 ATF agents away from gun violence at a time when gun deaths remain staggeringly high is particularly jarring. Likewise, diverting almost half of the agents in dozens of FBI field offices toward immigration enforcement raises unavoidable questions about what crimes are no longer being investigated with the same urgency. The Attorney General's response reflects a familiar pattern in institutional defense, emphasizing continuity of work while minimizing the importance of organizational structure, independence, and specialization. Saying that OCDETF's mission continues despite the dissolution of its executive office may be technically true, but Booker's concern is about effectiveness, coordination, and focus. Task forces and specialized units exist for a reason. They concentrate expertise, maintain institutional memory, and insulate enforcement decisions from shifting political winds. When those structures are dismantled, even if agents remain employed, the long-term capacity of the DOJ is weakened. Booker's remarks about the elimination of the Community Relations Service and the rescission of VOCA and VAWA grants further widen the scope of concern. These programs are not abstract line items. They represent decades of bipartisan investment in violence prevention, victim support, and conflict de-escalation. Their removal suggests a Justice Department increasingly oriented toward coercive enforcement, while retreating from prevention, accountability, and community trust. That imbalance, Booker implies, ultimately makes communities less safe, not more. The sharpest warning comes with his discussion of public corruption and white-collar enforcement. Reducing the public integrity section from 36 prosecutors to just 2 is not a marginal adjustment. It signals a near collapse of federal capacity to police corruption at the highest levels. Coupled with the rollback of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the disbanding of foreign influence efforts, and the dismissal of cases involving politically connected figures, the pattern feeds a perception that accountability is becoming selective. In a democracy already struggling with public cynicism, that perception is corrosive. Finally, Booker's pivot to antitrust underscores that these issues transcend ideology. Concentrated corporate power affects consumers, workers, and competition across party lines. His insistence on oversight before the antitrust subcommittee is less about one merger than about whether career expertise inside the DOJ is being overridden by political appointees. Taken together, Booker's commentary is a warning about institutional drift, a Justice Department that appears increasingly reactive, centralized, and politicized risks, losing both its effectiveness and its credibility.